What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Winter Wolf's Den. Today we get a very extra special treat, especially for somebody like me who absolutely hated how the IP wrapped up a couple of years ago. We're talking about episode 1 of HBO's Game of Thrones House of the Dragon. I believe the first episode title was Heirs of the Dragon. Just came out, just wrapped up watching it. It's on at 9 o'clock Eastern on HBO and HBO Max. Guys, I think Game of Thrones is back. I didn't think that a week ago. I didn't think that after seeing some of the trailers and seeing some of the hit pieces that were kind of attacking fans for some bullshit reasons. But all that stuff aside, I like just about everything I saw today, and I won't get into specific spoilers because this is hot off the presses, and I know a lot of people aren't going to get to this until tomorrow or the next day. But if you were a fan of older Game of Thrones when stories made sense, I think you're gonna like this. Nothing about this episode felt rushed. I thought that for its hour-long runtime, they did a lot of effective setup of world building. They named their characters, they put them in their proper places on the storyboard. You kind of see where lines are being drawn in the sand about who's going to align with who. We get characters that are kind of, you can see where their particular arcs are going to take them. It was all very well done. Matt Smith in particular, it was nice to see him playing something dark and brooding for a change. I feel like I always see this dude, he's basically still the Doctor. He's basically the Doctor in that shitty Morbius movie, but here, this dude was all kinds of fucked up. Sorry about that beep on the phone, let me shut that off. He was menacing at a point, and it was good to see. It really was. The actress that's playing Princess Rhaenyra also really good. The members of the King's Council pretty good. The King was probably the weakest performance, but he got to exercise a range of emotions, from happy to sad. And they did sad like old school Game of Thrones sad when it goes down. I mean, they were bragging about episode 1 was going to bring you Red Wedding level sorrow kind of thing, and a couple of stories that had come out, some leaks earlier in the week. I wouldn't say it hit that, but when the shit hit the fan for the character that it hit the fan for, that it got me right in the feel. So they did it. They did an effective job pulling me in to the show they were setting up, which I thought was really cool. The only gripe I think I have on the show, really on like a technical level, was some of the CGI very early on seemed kind of suspect, and it wasn't even the dragons really. It was the landscaping. Like you could almost see where they were putting live action stuff up against CG backgrounds, and some of it just kind of just rubbed me the wrong way. Watching it go down, it was kind of like they were not the sweeping panoramic kind of shots. It was like with people on horseback or on carriages, weird camera angles. It just kind of pulled me out of the story for a minute, but not bad at all. There's so many pluses to the show so far. It's going to come across like gushing for the next like 2 or 3 minutes, but I'm excited. Like, it's about fucking time shows got back to this kind of stuff, and they just kind of honored the content and just took their fans seriously, took the subject seriously. Game of Thrones was a show that pulled no punches. The good guys got it a lot. The bad guys usually took a little bit longer for them to get it, but they did. And I think a lot of that is going to be reflected in the show here. I think they captured the tone of A Song of Ice and Fire, the first 4 or 5 seasons that, universally kind of acclaimed that people liked. And I think they got back to that here. They definitely don't shy away from like any of the blood and guts that you thought they might have cleaned up because 2022 and people are sensitive. You got a scene where the City Watch begins to kind of exercise their newly authorized power, and they fuck shit up when they go out on patrol. We got a couple of severed hands. We got a couple of involuntary circumcisions, if you get what I mean there. You get a couple of decaps. It was, I'll spoil that part. You can watch it for your own, just so you can see. But they didn't mess around with that. There's also a particularly bloody medical procedure. I won't spoil that for you. But you felt for it. You felt for the person going through it. Like there were no cutaways. Like when the blood came, the camera was like on that, and you saw what was going down. Like it was old Game of Thrones. It was kind of savage, actually. Like it reminded me of some like 80s, early 90s like horror schlock where I was like, oh, like it was like that. And I'm glad, because I feel like too much of the stuff that we get now, especially if you lean more to like the Marvel or the superhero side of things, and it's situationally appropriate, but like we get a lot of sanitized violence, and it just kind of rushes right over you. You just expect it to happen, and then it's over and gone. But here it stuck with me. Like when the shit popped off, it stuck. It was there. You know, you can say the same thing for the limited kind of combat scenes that they had in this as well. Kind of the crux of the episode is one of their not a festival. It's kind of like it kind of is a festival celebration. They're waiting for they're waiting for the queen to deliver a baby to see if the king gets the son to be heir, kind of thing. So they're having like their typical joust that we saw in old Game of Thrones shows. And some of those they got down. And there were a couple of really brutal injuries that went down in the joust and in some of the hand-to-hand combat surrounding it. And it was juxtaposed. Might have been a little heavy-handed, but I thought it was all right. They juxtaposed kind of the violence and the brutality of the joust and, you know, the end of life that comes from that with the scene where the queen's in labor and the outcome from that. It was kind of nifty just to see it. At least it was, for me, it was thought-provoking. And again, too much of what we get lately, it's very much just shut your brain off and watch cool shit happen, and then there's nothing to talk about after. There's no deep dive. There's no, you better remember this because it might come back. This episode, I think, had plenty of that. There were definitely relationships that were hinted at. There were kind of roles that were hinted at. They're going to come back, hopefully, and have effective payoffs. You know, the whole thing I talk about sometimes, setup, payoff. Hopefully that stuff comes up again. I'd really like to see that. I think we need more of that kind of old school, traditional storytelling where things are set up in Act 1. They kind of vanish for Act 2, but then by Act 3 you get Chekhov's gun firing, if you know what I mean. And you wind up with a better product and something that's more robust to enjoy. So hopefully we're getting back to that. A couple of the other really nifty things about this show I thought the dragon designs were really cool. They're varied. You get to see two of them. The princess is on hers at the beginning doing some dragon riding stuff. And then near the end, Matt Smith is on his much larger, much more menacing looking red dragon, whose name I know I will butcher, so I'm not going to bother trying to say it. But anybody that's familiar with the lore would probably pick it up and pronounce it better. So that was definitely cool stuff there. I thought the everything looked good in terms of costuming, the set pieces when you knew there were actually physical people in place, like the throne room that the Iron Throne is in. It looks a little different because you got to remember this is like 175 years ago or whatnot, so things aren't. It's not like a perfect. This show happened and then prequel and we're gonna slide right in. Like no, it's not like that. So there are some things that'll look familiar, but you'll know they're different. And one of those big pluses I thought, because I kind of hate this about all new Disney Star Wars going all the way back to like Rogue One, when House of the Dragon started earlier and the credits rolled, I thought I picked up notes of the original theme, and I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool. At least, there's like an echo in there. It might have been when they were doing the prologue or the narration of the prologue. I'm like, all right, a little bit of old Game of Thrones. I'm feeling that. That's cool. But the end, when they wrapped up and kicked into the credits, they just full on boom, Game of Thrones, like old school theme song. But there was like a bit of a medley to it with some vocals. I'm not a musician. I'm sure I'm not using the right term for that. Definitely added some vocals, and it just sounded cool. And when it was running through, I was like, okay, all right, at least we got that. Because when we get into like the the Star Wars shows, Mandalorian, Boba Fett, Obi-Wan, they don't even hint hardly ever at old Star Wars music, and I always kind of found that lacking. Like I didn't think it was the best move to kind of cut off that very definitive, iconic thing that you could lean on to build that bridge between old fans and new shows, or new fans and shows that definitely have a legacy that people like me, if you're of a certain age, these are the things we love. So it was thumbs up HBO for figuring that shit out. That was pretty good. And I realize I'm gushing, so I'm gonna wrap this one up in a minute. I'm definitely in for more of this. I hope they keep up what they started here and get a really gritty story, and I think they're gearing up to give you one. There's definitely going to be some of that the internal civil war within the Targaryen house, even as they deal with external threats that are coming through. They've already seeded a number of interesting subplots that can affect the king, the princess, Matt Smith, who in the show is the king's brother, in case people weren't following. They set up a couple of other they very cleverly just threw him in there. They weren't throwaway lines. They might have looked like it. With other members of his high council, with his hand, with his number one, I can't think of the role. It wasn't the Master of Coin, but it was one of the other guys on the High Council. So I think they laid some really cool groundwork. And I'll say this for people of a certain viewpoint, myself typically included in a lot of those times, a lot of the stuff that we tend to get all bound up over about the swapping of certain roles and characters, and I get it. It's annoying when visual subject matter isn't completely adhered to, and you can feel like the taste of woke going along with it when you're like, well, you didn't need to swap him, and you didn't need to. Or the stuff with the fight the patriarchy and smash it thing, that is largely especially the patriarchy or fight the patriarchy bullshit, largely lacking in at least episode 1. I thought they handled the bit with the princess being the heir but can't be because of tradition. Nobody there that said that she couldn't be the heir said she couldn't do it because she's only a girl. They didn't say it because there was a law that said she couldn't be. They just left it as, hey, it's just been tradition, and if we're already, kind of like destabilized given the situation in the world, maybe we don't want to rock the boat anymore. And then another character had a counterpoint to that. So at least they gave you that back and forth, and that's what I think a lot of us have always been looking for with new additions to these IPs, is instead of being like on the nose and telling you this is the right thing and this is the wrong thing, you put the players in a room and you kind of let them hash it out, and it's that discourse, that discussion that lends itself to the conflict and storytelling. And I think this show is going to pull it off, because outside of that initial line, kind of where they're in the opening narration where they're pointing out verbatim that so-and-so was picked as the heir and this person wasn't a woman, and this person wasn't because she's a woman, they abandon all that nonsense as the episode goes on. They just give you the meat of what happens, and it's not every female in the show is taking shots at the dudes. Like the princess kind of does, but that's kind of just her character. But her mother, the queen, is very much on board with, no, we serve the realm how we can serve the realm, and my role as queen is to keep things stable, and God's willing have like the male heir. And she was down for her family, she was down for the kingdom, down for the people. And I think it was written on a level here that you're not gonna get on the MCU Disney stuff, and I can appreciate that over here. So I thought it made for a pretty good show. But I'm gonna wrap that up because I just gave you guys like 12 minutes without hopefully spoiling too much. I'm definitely gonna follow this show week to week. I'm thinking about maybe getting a small panel together, maybe to do like a spoiler version of the show, but we'll see what happens. But until next time, guys, I hope you get out to see this show, House of the Dragon on HBO. It's 9 o'clock Eastern on HBO and HBO Max. Check it out. Comment below. I'm dying to talk about this, and I'll see you guys in the next one.